turned cloudy and disgusting and gross and yeah.
Viewers can read into that how they want
I
to.
joked, that's a lot, but it's not like $1 billion. And then fast forward, I think the new price tag is much closer to $1 billion.
The war in Iran is hopefully over. It's been since February 28th, a little over 100 days.
Seemed pretty forgiving or pretty jazzed about this war and how it went, and I felt like in the crowd I was kind of the lone skeptic. I was zero enrichment to now saying, okay, we'll allow that for energy.
So it almost feels as though this war was very unnecessary. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Washed Up. This is episode 53. We are washed up in DC, reporting on the weekly news so that you don't have to listen to the legacy media that your grandparents do. And today is June 25th. There's a lot going on in DC. Trump's been doing a lot over here. End of the war. There's a lot to celebrate, a lot to talk about, starting with Colin went to see him last night talking on the mall.
Yeah, this is gonna be a barn burner of an episode for sure. I joked with Abby before that I came loaded for bear today, so I have a lot to say and a lot going on. So I'm gonna start with, oh, also apologies in advance if I kind of monopolize a little bit this episode, but there's a lot to get to. I was at an event last night with Donald Trump where he was delivering a speech to a supportive crowd on the National Mall to launch the America 250 celebrations and anniversaries. Everyone knows 4th of July this year. It's kind of a special anniversary. So they're doing like 10 days of celebration in DC. So if all good, I'll go into a little bit what that was like, and then we can do some commentary on the other side. But I feel like the Trump administration got their stuff together in terms of like organizing events, because other things we've done in DC that they put together were quite chaotic and long lines and just a mess. But this was really easy to get into, and I got a pretty good spot, like kind of close up to the stage. But that being said, they drug it out for so long until Trump finally came out to speak, and I think it's obviously very intentional. Like Trump is a showman, he knows what he's doing. And if anything, he understands lighting and timing. And so when I got there and was standing on the mall, just waiting for him to show, they had a bunch of cabinet secretaries come out. It was like Doug Burgum, Brooke Rollins, Sean Duffy, who I found to be kind of uniquely annoying. He's the Secretary of Transportation. Yeah, and then they just went through like who else was there. It was like McMahon, Blanche, the Labor Secretary was also there, Dr. Oz, Kash Patel, Mark Wayne Mullen, Mike Johnson was there, the Speaker of the House. So it was kind of like a who's who in a way, although some of those people in the administration are pretty new, so it was interesting. The dynamic was different than like maybe past events. I thought the song choices were really interesting. They were playing a lot of Elton John, and I texted Abby joking, like, do they know that Elton John is gay? Because it was just kind of funny. They were playing like Rocket Man and Tiny Dancer, which I know Trump is a fan of that song in particular. Tiny Dancer, it reminds me of when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, like that was the song playing in the background in that really famous clip. Anyway, they drug it out for a really long time, and the most impressive part was the flyovers that they had, where on the National Mall, basically, like they would have airplanes fly over, and one of them was a stealth bomber that was kind of being like escorted by these other planes, and that was kind of freaky because you don't know that the stealth bomber is flying over until after the fact. So you just kind of like see it first, and then like the sound hits you, and it's terrifying. I think I actually like swore "oh shit" out loud when it happened. And everyone around me was freaking out, filming it. I'm not, like I said, I'm not quick on the draw. I didn't even get a video of this, because that's how quick it was happening. Um, and yeah, it was a fun vibe, I would say. Again, Sean Duffy was annoying. Jocko Willink was also there, and he was like screaming at everyone about the history of the U.S., and it was just really annoying. Yeah, so then Trump finally came out.
And hello, Washington, and a very big hello to America. Thank you. And 10 days from now, our country will celebrate one of the most monumental milestones in human history. We will mark 250 years of glorious American freedom.
It was kind of just like the rundown of exactly what you'd expect. Like he was just bragging about the economy, about the historic nature of the anniversary that we're in.
Best economy on earth. We have the strongest military on earth. We have the most powerful technology on earth. We have the greatest culture on earth. And above all, we have the greatest people on earth.
He was talking about the end of the Iran war, which, like I said, we're going to get into.
Nuclear weapon, that's done. And thanks to the power and skill of the United States Armed Forces, today Iran has no Navy, no Air Force, no anti-aircraft capacity, no missile. Iran fully opened the Strait of Hormuz and accomplished what no president has ever been able to accomplish.
And just really playing it up, playing up his part in all of these things, even though, again, with like particularly Iran, that was kind of his mess that we stepped in, and there was no ownership whatsoever taken for the consequences of any of it.
As expected. Yeah, I feel like Trump has been going to these back-to-back things around DC or like the Trump administration in general. Like, I mean, I feel like Colin and I have talked about the 250 for a while and how we've been seeing advertisements for it. Funny enough, I was on the West Coast this past week and I was in Vegas and the Bay Area, and I can't remember which place had like advertisements for America 250. And I feel like it might have been Vegas, maybe some ties there with UFC. We can talk a little bit about that as well. But I thought that was funny, like being on the West Coast, because I think I kept thinking that it was like a very big thing here, and I didn't expect like other places in the country to also be like advertising it to the extent, I guess, that DC is.
Yeah, so I actually also was on the West Coast. I was in LA, and they similarly at the airport and LAX had like all the merch and stuff, and so I was also really surprised by that. But so for the 250th in DC, though, Trump is really taking on a lot of projects. There's the reflecting pool and the Lincoln Memorial that was very botched and ended up costing $14 million so far, which was 11.2 million over the expected budget to change out the, I guess, like tile or the color of it to make it more blue. Ended up turning green because algae grew. And it's just been a nightmare.
As by thugs, bad people. But soon we'll be looking as beautiful as it looked just 2 weeks ago. In fact, I looked at it just a little while ago. It looks perfect already. But we're fixing it. The vandals got to it. They've largely been caught and are being prosecuted. We can't let that happen to our country.
Check out a great short that Colin made.
I made a little reel
In
about it.
real about it.
So that happened, and then there was also, like you said, the UFC event, which required them to build an entire octagon on the south lawn of the White House. What did you see about that one in particular?
Oh my God, there was just so much like annoying traffic and like roads blocked off that day. I don't particularly go down there often. Actually, wait, I think I was out of town when that event was happening. I don't remember right now because I wasn't particularly plagued with it, but I remember
Oh,
so
I
many
was.
people
I
talking
was
about
very
it.
plagued with
Like
it.
so many people were complaining about it to me that I felt like I was there even though I wasn't. I didn't have any obstacles because I don't think I was in town that day. But in Vegas, there was a lot of people like streaming it places. Yeah, because of, or for the people who don't know the UFC's connection to Vegas is Dana White. He lives in Vegas
Friend
and
of the show.
yeah. I saw a lot of people posting about it. An influx of like tourists were here for it too, which kind of surprised me. Actually, no, it didn't surprise me too much, but I can only imagine how much it was to purchase tickets to come during that time. I can't imagine all the tourists who are going to be here for 4th of July as well.
Oh God, yeah. So the UFC thing was supposed to be for the 250th, like all these other things, but also it happened to fall exactly on Donald Trump's 80th birthday, which, as listeners of the show will remember from last year,
We celebrated his birthday last year too.
we went to the 250th Army anniversary last year, which was also on Trump's birthday. And it just was really coincidental, the timing of these events, which seem very kind of self-congratulatory in a way, like it's a big night where Trump can kind of be in the spotlight on his birthday coincidentally. And we know how much he loves that attention and spotlight. And it feels to me more like it was a birthday bash than the kickoff of the 250 celebration.
It seemed a little too, yeah, like you said, like showy, theatrical to me too. And I don't really know why something like that would commemorate 250 years of the country. Like,
I mean, everyone was saying it was very undignified to have something like that at the White House. I mean, I guess, but it is really funny how quickly everyone stopped talking about the UFC fight because of the algae in the reflecting pool really dominating the headlines.
the algae in the reflecting pool, I feel like I heard way more about than the UFC, which was so funny to me. I'm sure Trump hated that.
And it's kind of become a metaphor in a way for the way that every time that Trump has recently been trying to take an action or do something, it kind of turns to crap. And it's like the more effort that he puts into stuff, the more it turns to crap. And the reflecting pool is kind of a funny commentary in and of itself because, like it's supposed to be very dignified and like reflection. That's kind
And
of
then
the
it
theme
becomes
of
like
it,
muggy
which is something exactly like
under
it.
the creation of Trump.
It's turned cloudy and disgusting and gross and yeah.
Viewers can read into that how they want to.
Yeah, I mean, I was tying it back to the myth of Narcissus where, he gets so enamored by his reflection that he loses track of all else around him except for himself. And I think the Washington Post or New York Magazine or one of them like stole that. I don't know. I swear I came up with that first. But yeah, it's kind of just turned into all the construction of it is a huge metaphor for, I think, to me, I'm reading it as Donald Trump kind of flailing as he's turning 80. He's getting older. He's realizing he's near the end of his life. And his fear of mortality is driving him to try to establish and create a lasting legacy, which is resulting in terror for the rest of us who are just trying to commute and make our way around the city.
Yeah, his projection is not easy on people who actually live here. Self-projection.
So what other construction project? So last night at the speech he gave, he was.
How was like the actual logistics of that event? You said that earlier that it was better than like the line. I mean, the military parade last year. I remember those lines being like absolutely crazy, and Colin and I both like in line being like, "Why are we here? Like, what are we doing? This is for washed up. This is for washed up."
Yeah, for all of our subscribers, or almost 100 subscribers out there, we did it for you. And it wasn't that bad. Like I said, it was pretty easy to get in. It was well planned out by like the Trump admin standards and whoever was putting it on. Maybe it was Freedom 250, whatever group. But like I said, the lineup was pretty good. They had cabinet secretaries speaking. They kept it engaging. The flyovers were actually pretty cool, even though a little bit freaky. What else? There was a guy there talking about 9/11 that was a little much. It felt a little bit propagandistic to me. They had a pastor speak. They've been really bringing in sort of like evangelical pastors that are kind of around Trump's orbit, and it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. In the same way that like Sean Duffy was really talking about faith, and I'm like, I don't really need to be mansplained about faith by a cabinet secretary. Like maybe just make sure that the planes stay in the sky and the roads are open and like do your job, I guess. Um, so yeah, I didn't love like all of the sort of rah 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 about around like the sort of conservative values and themes. It is what it is. You kind of expect that from maybe a Republican administration. Um, but yeah, other stuff that Trump talked about, he mentioned the 250th anniversary arch that he wants to build by Arlington Cemetery, which would, I guess, be 250 feet tall.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
hearing about that for a while. When I first heard about it, I think like a couple months ago, I thought it was a rumor.
I mean, I've seen like mock-up designs of it, and it actually, to me, it looked kind of cool. The only issue being is I would be okay with it if it was funded privately by private donors who were like willing to give their money for that. But if it's be like with the ballroom that he's also been constructing on the White House grounds, he said it was going to be privately funded, and then it actually ended up costing taxpayers a substantial amount. On this show, I had joked when they said the ballroom was going to cost 400 million. I joked, that's a lot, but it's not like $1 billion. And then fast forward, I think the new price tag is much closer to $1 billion when you factor in the security that they want to build into this ballroom.
Yeah, I agree with you that like if he wants to pay for that himself or his friends want to pay for that, sure, whatever. But the fact that we're paying for that is actually ridiculous and something that I think is super valid to be critiqued of by people.
Yeah, so we're the ones who are going to end up footing the bill for a lot of this, or the American people are. Like we said with the reflection pool, it was way above the budgeted amount and still probably will go up in amount because now they're going to have to drain it and do all this other crap. They've hired people to be standing and like cleaning out the algae physically. It's kind of comedic at this point, and who knows how much that is going to cost. Speaking of things that we're footing the bill for, the war in Iran. It's
This is
over.
a us being tentatively happy until I guess the next 60 days roll around and we'll see what happens. Um, but yeah, the war in Iran is hopefully over. It's been since February 28th, which is approximately like a little over 100 days of war, and the memorandum of understanding was announced where this is like a period of time until like the permanent settlement, which is supposed to be like 60 days long. And so we're gonna talk about the aspects of that right now.
First of all, you guys have no idea how hard I've been looking for a banner that says mission accomplished, like the one they had behind George W. Bush infamously, and I cannot find one, so I don't know what that says about America, but could not find one on Amazon. I tried. I was saving it for this exact
No
occasion.
missions are ever accomplished here in the US.
I was saving it for this exact occasion when the war with Iran would finally end, and it's been about 4 months of fighting. And to Trump's credit for finally getting out, in my view, surrendering, he finally got out of this situation. 4 months too late in my book. It never should have started in the first place.
Right.
But I'm very grateful that it seems like there is an end in sight, and this isn't going to drag on for years, which is something that we had previously expressed concern about.
I think it's funny that you're like that you had said like yeah like we surrendered, but in Trump's perspective I do not think that he thinks that at all. Like the way that he's talking about it, he's like yeah, this is major success for the US in the war. Iran was forced to negotiate with us, and you know the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz lowers oil prices, and that's all up to me. And the framework that he's kind of putting the ending of this war is very, yeah, again, rah, 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 congratulatory to Trump.
I mean, credit where credit is due. I do credit him somewhat for finally being willing to get out. But before we get into the exact stipulations of the Memorandum of Understanding, I just want to go over to what this has actually cost us. As I alluded, the taxpayers were footing the bill. I saw a stat that it cost 113 billion in 108 days of the war. So that's over a billion a day. Um, and most of that was paid for at the start of the war, but they've just continued to spend and spend and spend on this. And in terms of the lives cost, the American death toll was between 13 and 16, with hundreds injured that we know of, and around 3,600 Iranians dead, mostly, but well, not just limited to combatants, but civilians as well. And then also 4,000 Lebanese in southern Lebanon who were mostly killed by the IDF.
Not very good statistics. Anyone who is looking at this as, I mean, I'm glad the war is over, but I don't think that we should be going about being like, oh my God, victory. Because I don't think that, like you said, the war should have ever happened in the first place.
It's really interesting. So the death toll on the American side is actually very similar to the number of American troops who died in the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Do you remember when Biden was pulling out of Afghanistan? I want to say in August of 21.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a suicide bomber at the airport there as they were pulling out American troops and whatnot, and it killed 13 Americans. And I remember that pretty much sank Biden's approval rating for the rest of his presidency. I mean, he had other issues, but the 13 Americans killed in that withdrawal really he never recovered from. So I don't know. To me, I think something similar is going to happen with Trump, where like to me, in my mind, this is the end of his presidency effectively
Right.
because he lost so much support.
So much support and trust, especially for the people who mainly were running off of this information, being like, oh, he's not going to get us into another situation like this because he's so anti-interventionist. But yeah, flash forward 8 months, 6 months in, feels like eight. Um,
Yeah.
so much has happened, and he's already lost the trust of so many Americans when there's 3.5 more years of this.
I mean, we'll have to wait till the actual midterms this year to see the long-term consequences of this war and whether or not it's swayed enough Americans away from Trump that he is effectively out of favor and out of power in some ways. Certainly, if the Democrats win Congress, then he'll be out of power in a lot of ways. But I think he also was reading the writing on the wall that this was not going in his direction in terms of the public opinion and favor. It was losing him so much favor. So maybe we should talk about why. It was harming the economy. The price of oil was skyrocketing with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And I think people were starting to really feel it and see it. Strategic Petroleum Reserve was at its lowest point since the 80s. I believe we had expended around 124 million barrels from that SPR. So Trump saw the writing on the wall that this was going to end up in an economic catastrophe, and he, I think, backpedaled on it. Is that kind of your read as well?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that also bringing up Vance's role in this too, like he is definitely, I could tell, like gunning for that seat of presidency. And I think that he's kind of tried to step back as either, I don't know if it was his choice or what, but like as like either a scapegoat for this or he's trying to, again, like put himself up for candidacy for president because at first he was kind of more on that Trump wave of being like, yeah, yeah, like let's get into this war, like um re let's be more aggressive with this. But then he is kind of more for like that diplomatic ending now. I mean, he defended the agreement on TV and in Congress, and there's been like reports of him pressuring Israel and others not to undermine the negotiations as well.
Yeah, Vance has been a hugely interesting figure in all of this. Even flash forward to our first episode about the Iran war, we were kind of calling him out, like, where is he? Why isn't he pushing back on this? Because historically, he had been someone who was more non-interventionist. So to see him kind of quietly go along with Trump launching this war, along with Marco Rubio and some other war hawks in the administration, was very disheartening. And I had said back then, and I still think, if he had let the war go on and Vance had never spoken up or done anything, it would have cost him whatever political future he had expected. I think possibly he's saved it by stepping in when he did, and Vance was a key negotiator with Iran and coming to this memorandum of understanding. And as you mentioned, he was in the media. I think he did a press conference where he directly addressed people in the Israeli cabinet, Netanyahu's cabinet, we basically, Vance was saying Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to Israel at this moment. It also happens to be the head of the leading superpower, and so maybe don't come after Trump and start attacking him for not being willing to continue in this fight.
Yeah. I think that Vance has gotten a hold of a lot of the anti-interventionist conservatives. I feel like a lot of them have been aligning with his perspective, and that is why I'm like, this is this man's campaign for presidency.
He also just had a book drop, which is always a good sign that there's a
Book, a
political future.
podcast.
Yeah, so good to see Vance stepping up in a way. I wish we
Ish, he should have
never.
done it earlier.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Rubio has still been very quiet, very silent.
He's in the
Don't know where he
doghouse.
is exactly. But also circling back a little bit to the optics of all of this and Israel's role in this, because I still believe, as I said in March, that we mostly got into this because Israel wanted it and they wanted to be the regional hegemon of the Middle East. And this is possibly the worst case scenario for Israel
Hmm.
because now Iran coming out of this memorandum is very emboldened by the fact that it basically got attacked by two of the world's leading militaries, and it not only survived it, but is coming out of it richer economically and militarily in some ways. And the US has been depleted. So, yeah, do you want to maybe talk? Well, okay, going back quickly. So Israel is now in a position where it's kind of going to be the pariah of the region where it had been hoping to be the hegemon, and Vance is kind of the one who put a stop to it. So I'm curious how that's gonna play. Like, Is Trump still sympathetic to Israel, but Vance is the one putting his foot down, or have they both kind of come to the understanding that this was harming the Trump-Vance administration politically and that they never should have done it, and Israel is, like you said, kind of in the doghouse with them?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how those, I guess, tensions play out too, because like we're both saying, like Vance actually called it out, which was kind of a surprising move on his part. I like didn't expect him to be so bold. And obviously we know his history or we know Trump's history with backing Israel and all of this. So it's really interesting to see it play out, I guess, in real time. Um,
It seems to me like Trump realized that this was poor optics for him, that the rest of the US was kind of catching on to the fact that Israel was the one driving this war and not Trump, even if Trump was the one to make the final call to launch and engage in the war. I think a lot of America was souring on the fact that Israel had so much influence over our president. And Trump is politically savvy enough to recognize that it doesn't look well if it seems like he's kind of taking orders from another head of state. And he even had admitted recently that we had spent too much on defending Israel, like more than they were even defending on their own for their own sake. And like I said, when our economic situation is going down and the American public sentiment is turning against Israel, I think Trump can recognize that and respond, which is what he showed by being willing to negotiate a memorandum.
do you want to go in and talk about, I guess, the different aspects of
Yeah,
the MOU?
yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
Like I said in the beginning, it is currently going to be like this 60-day period. I think the most important thing, or the most relevant that people are talking about, is definitely the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and also people are talking about, I've heard some people talking about the leniency that Iran has right now in terms of negotiations on nuclear programs. I think that's something that people have actually been critiquing the deal right now for people like the Trump admin to like go a little stricter on there, but I don't think they have the leeway to do so.
Yeah, that's been kind of the main sticking point for over a year now, at least, or ever since Trump threw out the JCPOA, which was the Iran agreement where we had negotiated with them under Obama that they were not going to seek to create a nuclear weapon. And under that agreement, there was a certain amount of uranium enrichment they were allowed to do, but not past a certain point, because when you enrich past a certain point, you can make weapons out of it as opposed to just energy production. And so after that got thrown out, there's been this open conversation about are we going to allow them to enrich or not? Trump has waffled on it as everything he does. He had said no enrichment, 0% whatsoever. Then we got into last summer's war with them, and we said we obliterated their nuclear program, so it's all in the past. Then we got into this this war with them in February, and now it seems like Iran is going to be allowed to enrich for energy purposes at
Yeah.
the very least. And they said they won't seek a nuclear bomb, which is same as the JCPOA, the original deal that all this hinged on. So they've come out of it now with basically the same terms as before, and we've come out of it saying that we're going to be hardline, allow zero enrichment, to now saying, okay, we'll allow that for energy.
So it almost feels as though this war was very unnecessary. All the terms are the same as before, and like the only people who are, I guess, giving up on their negotiation is us.
Completely.
At least what the Trump administration wanted it to be. And I think that's what a lot of the people who are upset with Trump, who are conservative and like the more like the war hockey people are upset about. They're like, why are we letting this happen? Where are the regulations? Why is the terms the same on their side?
And it's funny because it was even a false pretense in the first place that this was about their uranium enrichment. It wasn't. It was more about, I think, the other resources and the regional power balance. But for the people who think that it is about a nuclear weapon and Iran's pursuit of it, even they have to admit that we messed this up badly, bungled it. And now, yeah, Iran is under the same conditions as they were under Obama, more or less. But now they're going to be a lot richer because we're also giving them a crap load of money. Did you see anything about that?
For the sanctions,
Hmm.
yeah, I did see that. The US agreeing to provide economic relief. So, yeah. Um,
The figure that I saw was around $500 billion, and that's going to be in the frozen assets that we release back to Iran, as well as $300 billion in reconstruction costs, which is going to come from the other Arab states, not the US in that case. But then also like 100 billion in sanction relief and I think maybe another 100 billion in oil exports that they're expected to get out of the reduced sanction load.
yeah, and I think that as long as Iran complies with like all these agreements, like they're definitely getting all this money, which yeah, that's I think that's why so many people are angry too. They're like, or the people who were in support of this war but like now aren't, and why Trump is losing so much support is because it's like so obvious that there's no, even if his goal was to be winner, that there is no like quote winner here on our side.
So, like with the money that we're giving them back, they could conceivably not only build back the defenses that they expended to fight off the US and Israel, but they could enlarge their military and their missile supply and their drones, which is kind of how they, I think, won a lot of the war. They kept the Strait of Hormuz closed, more or less with a drone army. And so those are very cheap in comparison to like the missiles and the interceptors that we were expending in the munitions to fight the war. So yeah, now that they have all this cash, they can just rebuild their military back stronger than ever. So that goal of the war was out the window. Um, Same with again the goal of deterring them from enriching uranium. That's out the window. Um, what else? Um,
Disagreements about Israeli, Hezbollah, and Lebanon. Lebanon.
yeah.
What have you been saying about that?
That's been another sticking point of the entire war, where Israel was really going hard on southern Lebanon and bombing Beirut, and like I said, allegedly 4,000 civilians, mostly civilians, but also some Hezbollah targets in Lebanon were taken out. So Israel's been hitting Lebanon hard, and as we've been trying to negotiate a peace with Iran, the U.S. has been telling Israel like, hold off
I
a minute.
chill, and they're not.
And they can't. They just keep hitting Lebanon. And so we've been, in some ways, hamstrung by Israel's unilateral effort against Lebanon and their inability to stop it or hold off. And that's hindered the negotiations up until this point.
Yeah, even when the MOU was first announced to like today, which is June 25th, Iran postponed a part of the deals for a little bit too because of the Israeli military in Lebanon. So, like we said, the US is like, it almost feels like the US is like telling their problem child, like, please stop. We need this deal.
I mean, Israel is in serious risk now of, like I said, being kind of a pariah in the region. Um, we continue to be allies of them, I guess, in some ways with the U.S., but our our current leading candidate for the Republicans, J.D. Vance, doesn't seem so happy with them, and we know Trump isn't very happy with them. He apparently has cussed out Netanyahu on the phone a couple of times. Um, Recently, but also in the past, like last summer when Israel started attacking Qatar, and Qatar is an ally of ours. So, yeah, we've told them to chill. They cannot get the hint, and hopefully now they will. But it is not something that's really in the US's control.
Yeah, and we know how Trump feels about when someone or something or an event makes him look dumb.
But he sure was taking credit for it last night. And, if you had only gone to the event, you would have thought that we had just won World War II all over again. And he was patting himself on the back, saying, well, actually, Trump last night called the Iran war a little journey. And he said that it had only taken a week, and we had solved that
Right.
problem real quick.
Right.
And it's just kind of maddening because obviously it wasn't a week. It was shorter than we thought. 4 months is not 8 years. But I think he was very much minimizing and downplaying the not only the lives lost, but the economic consequences, the global power consequences, the way that it made the U.S. look on the global stage, which is very poor, and how just unnecessary that all of it was
Hmm.
with the final negotiation, the memorandum, and how it brought us right back to the JCPOA, if not at a disadvantage.
Yeah, very embarrassing for Trump. We'll have to see what else he says or what other lies are spewed or exaggerations. Like, it's so funny. Little journey, if that's what you want to call it. I would love for time to move for me as it does for Trump. Maybe he's, oh my gosh, I don't even want to say that. It's like, I'm like, maybe he's immortal and that's how he's still alive today.
So I did want to touch on maybe the public sentiment around all this just a little bit, because like I said, last night I was among Trump supporters for the most part, and they seemed pretty forgiving or pretty jazzed about this war and how it went, and I felt like in the crowd I was kind of the lone skeptic and person who was still very angry. I'm still very angry about the girls' school that the US allegedly bombed with a tomahawk,
Yeah.
killing around 160 young Iranian girls. And there's still open questions about why that exactly happened, who's at fault within the Pentagon. There's been all kinds of restructuring and people leaving the Pentagon, top ranking people, that's kind of happening right now. But the public seems more or less okay, or at least
I
willing to forgive and move on.
I feel like that public is willing to forgive and move on. I feel like I've seen a lot of the opposite, in a crowd like outside of Trump supporters and Colin there to report for Washed Up. I've been seeing a lot of people, maybe this is just my echo chamber too, of being like that war was so unnecessary. Trump acted without sufficient congressional approval to begin with. The administration never clearly demonstrated an immediate Iranian threat. Yeah, just a lot of reasons why this should have never happened in the first place. Anti-interventionist conservatives too, like I said, kind of going the more advanced route now with this war should end as quickly as possible and the US should avoid another long Middle East conflict.
Hopefully, the US will take the hint and Trump as well and not get us involved in any future conflicts, let alone Middle Eastern conflicts, which are notoriously complicated with all the different interests in that region. Although, last night he was teasing a invasion of Cuba. So, yeah. I mean, Cuba
I'm
is
scared.
we've already invaded Venezuela this year, toppled Maduro, supplanted him with Delcy Rodriguez, but now with the kind of communist government of Cuba falling, we indicted Raul Castro, and they've been on the verge of collapse for like 60 plus years at this point. And so Trump is already soft launching the U.S. Invading Cuba, and we'll have to see if he actually capitalizes on that or if he chickens out. But after this, I don't know. It's anyone's guess.
Feels like he's just has a little list or a little he's like spinning the globe, throwing a dart at it, being like, let's go here next.
Totally. And just, I guess to wrap it up, this is kind of the last thing I have. Alluding back to, again, the Trump supporters of last night's rally event, whatever you want to call it. When the stealth bomber flew over, someone right behind me said, that's probably the last thing that the Supreme Leader of Iran heard before he died. And I just like cringed
Ugh.
because like, I understand that we are not friends with Iran. We have historically been enemies. We don't really see eye to eye on much. We've criticized the Iranian regime for a lot of different things, for being oppressive, tyrannical. We're not a fan of theocracies in general here in the US or on the show. But it did just kind of make me cringe because um, you can have all the enemies that you want, but I think there's no real benefit to just killing people who you disagree with for its own sake, and especially not when it's in another country's best interest and arguably not even in our own to do so.
Hmm.
Um, and whoever said that behind me, I don't think was considering all the things that we just discussed.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like that's a major theme of our show. We're always talking about like human life and understanding the nuances of what happens when you're getting into conflicts like this one. Like to engage in so much just destruction and violence without any outright look into the future, any foresight into like what is going on, especially if it's on a behalf of another country. Yeah, I totally agree with you and your sentiment there.
Yeah, I mean the problem with war in general is like I said, it's not acknowledging the other person's perspective whatsoever, and it's just saying that we disagree with you, therefore we are going to kill you. And that really oftentimes doesn't provide the avenue for like negotiation that could actually be mutually beneficial. We tried that a little bit in the summer of 25 before we hit them the first time. But arguably, we didn't try hard enough, and I think the world would look a lot different right now. Certainly for all the people who lost their lives, who might not have, if we had tried a diplomatic solution a little bit harder, or if we'd never thrown out the JCPOA to begin with, because Trump's rationale was that we should never just send Iran $1.7 billion for the JCPOA. That's crazy.
And
And
now he's given so much more.
now we're at almost 500 billion plus the 100 billion that we spent on the war itself.
I feel like that's all I have too.
Yeah.
Mic drop for us. Mission
Happy
accomplished, as
birthday,
they
America.
say. Okay, washed
Pushed
up
up out.
out.